Welcome back to The Last Word. Will O'Callaghan sitting in for Matt Cooper this evening. Earlier this week, the European Commission announced their plans to set up a travel cert which would allow EU citizens to travel to other member states without having to quarantine on arrival. The certificate would show if a person had been vaccinated, if they'd had a recent negative PCR test or recovered from having COVID-19. The decision by the European Commission has been welcomed by the travel industry in Ireland. However, there have been calls for the Irish government not to implement the passports. The Irish Council for Civil Liberties has written to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, calling on him to consider rights before supporting the plan to bring in vaccine certs for travel across the EU. They've outlined their concerns that vaccine passports could impact many people's rights, including equality and non-discrimination, freedom of movement, privacy and bodily integrity. To join us to discuss this, we'll be talking to Ciaran Mulligan from thefabuloustraveller.com in a moment, but Liam Herrick is here from the Irish Council of Civil Liberties. Liam, to be honest, a lot of people, when we discussed this on the show yesterday, were welcoming the idea of being able to travel around the EU and the potential for a vaccine passport or cert allowing them to do so. Give me the argument for not implementing this.
Good afternoon, Will. Well, I think first of all it's worth noting that the WHO has recommended against schemes of this type. There's a lot of uncertainty about the vaccines as they come in, and we fully support the vaccine programme, but in terms of how effective vaccines are in preventing people transmitting the disease, the science in that is emerging. And we have to remember that this is hopefully a short-term problem. Now, it's very understandable that people in the tourism industry, and the pressure for this has mainly come from countries like Greece, Spain and Portugal that are heavily dependent on tourism. They're looking at the short-term issue of summer 2021, and they're thinking that this might be a quick fix to try to allow travel in the next couple of months, while we're hopefully trying to go through the last stages of rolling out vaccine programs across Europe and solving the problem. The difficulty from our point of view is that this is a completely new departure in terms of having a health surveillance technology at points of departure for people that are travelling within Europe, which is a free movement zone. And we fear, first of all, that once it's put in place, it might be difficult to roll it back. In the context of where there is a shortage of supply of vaccine all across Europe, this is going to introduce significant discrimination against people who haven't been able to get the vaccine yet. And we're also looking at organisations like Privacy International, which are raising, I think, a practical point here, that if we have a vaccine certification system, that may mean that everybody who gets a vaccine will have to receive the certificate at the same time because it's a digital format. So this might actually slow down what is already a slow and problematic process. So we think that we understand where it's coming from, but there's a lot of potential difficulties with this.
Your main concern then will be probably the wider issues of this, that this could potentially become something that's worked into your passport potentially in the future then?
Absolutely. And, you know, what's happening at the moment, people are required to have negative tests before they travel. Now, if that's enforced effectively, you would wonder why that would not be adequate in and of itself. But if we have a mandatory digital certificate system for everybody who's travelling, I think it opens up very wide privacy and civil liberties problems, which might be very difficult to put back in the box when all of this is over in a few months' time.
The argument against that would probably be that people are opting into this because they want to travel, so therefore they're happy enough for their vaccine status to be carried on a certificate so that they can travel, and they will probably argue that it's a small price to pay to be able to move freely again.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly understand that. I mean, there is one set of issues that are raised related to travel, but, you know, within Europe, travel isn't some kind of additional benefit. It isn't all about holidays. It isn't all about recreation. Within the European Union, people are travelling for work. They're travelling for essential family reasons, and putting up barriers to people travelling within Europe for essential reasons at this time, when people are waiting to get vaccines that they can't access in countries like Ireland, I think is the wrong step at the wrong time. We understand the pressure from the people working in the tourist industry and the aviation. They're very real issues, but I think that this could have unintended consequences which we might be living with for much longer than this short-term COVID problem.
Ciaran Mulligan is with us as well from thefabuloustraveller.com. Ciaran, in your opinion, is this a small price to pay in order to be able to move around, or would you share some of these concerns?
Good evening, Will. I don't see this as a barrier at all. I see this as something that is going to open up travel across the EU and hopefully extend it further into worldwide and possibly USA travel. I know the aim of the EU here is to create these certificates that will give that access, within the EU, but it will open it up. Somebody who has already got a vaccination doesn't want to have to do a PCR test to say, to show that that they're free from COVID at that stage. So, I mean, the whole point of this, it is to be non-discriminatory. It's giving people confirmation that they've either been vaccinated, that they have a test certificate to say that they're either PCR test or rapid antigen test and that they're negative, or for people who have recovered from COVID-19. So, I mean, the travel industry is on its knees. It is very much crying out, it's still crying out for additional support from the government. But we need to open up travel. We need to do it safely when we're told that it's safe to do. And I think, to be honest, I think the EU will help open it up for Ireland. I think we're very conservative. And in some degrees, when we saw what happened at Christmas time, we need to be somewhat conservative. But I do think, from around June onwards, we need to be opening up travel and let this industry, get back up off its knees at the moment. I mean, you see travel agents, you see airlines, even incoming tourism is suffering. So we really need to look at it. And I see this as a positive step rather than anything negative. I don't see this as a barrier. I see this as look, just people who could be anti-vaxxers who won't want to get vaccinated, who may have got COVID and who may want to travel, or they're happy to get an antigen or a PCR test. All this is doing is confirming that you have one or the other and that you are now free to travel in a safe and compliant way for everybody.